Without wasting much time, I would like to propose that we move on to the next speaker. Dr. Goreka, if you can stop sharing your screen, thank you very much. The next speaker is Professor Ukunda Elizabeth Bachwao. She's a researcher with experience in development policy research and associate professor of governance and development at Uganda Christian University, where she currently serves as director of postgraduate studies. She holds a PhD in international development from Massey University, New Zealand, a master's in development studies from the Australian National University, and a Bachelor of Social Work from Makerere University. Her teaching and research interests include governance, social diversity, higher education, public sector reforms, HIV/AIDS, gender, and analysis. She's also involved with a group investigating peer victimization in high schools in Mukono district, Uganda. Professor Bachwao will present to us the plight of working breastfeeding mothers in Uganda's higher education institutions and the implications for children and work-life policies. Professor, the floor is yours, and you have 15 minutes of presentation, which will be followed by 5 minutes of Q&A. Do you have the permission to share your screen? Yeah, well, okay, wonderful. If we can have it in slideshow, we'll be ready.
Yes. Thank you, Professor, for that introduction. Good afternoon, and good morning and good night, depending on where you are. Very happy to be here and to get this chance to present. I'll just show my face for a few minutes and then I will switch it off so that we won't have issues with bandwidth. Thank you very much for coming. My presentation is based on a research that we carried out at a Ugandan higher education institution, and we are looking at the plight of breastfeeding mothers at this institution and looking at implications for children and work-life policies. I have to acknowledge my colleagues, Mercy Emanio, Ivas Kemijisha, Peter Chiwumulo, and Solomon Mwije, who were copy-eyes on this research, and acknowledge Uganda Christian University for the funding. This research, thing is not moving. I couldn't move my slides, but now it's working. This is the outline of my presentation. I'll be looking at those issues, and this research was looking at the issue of gender equality, which is the focus of the 5th Sustainable Development Goal, where we are arguing as nations and international bodies that women and men should have equal opportunities in life and to participate in the public. But the speech, what we say and what we do seem to be contradictory, because in many workplaces, the design of those workplaces, particularly in sub-Saharan countries and in Uganda in particular, they've not been designed to make it easy or possible for women to participate equally with men, especially because women are the ones that have to bear the productive and reproductive roles. And because of this, it affects their roles, both the reproductive roles, and also affects their work, because they want to work, but it becomes difficult because if they have children, then it becomes a problem. When in this case, we are focusing on the issue of breastfeeding as a reproductive role. When women fail to balance, it affects their children's well-being. So we are talking about women and gender equality, but we are also looking at how that affects their children and their well-being, this being child-focused research. We are looking at the issue of maternity protection, which is a policy, which is what is recommended by International Labour Organization, that all workplaces should provide maternity protection. Why is this? Because women have been encouraged by the World Health Organization to breastfeed exclusively for 6 months if they want their children to have a good life, to have a healthy life. They need to have breastfed for 6 months exclusively. And the International Labour Organization has argued that there should be special protection for women who are pregnant and for women who are breastfeeding, so that when they become pregnant, they can be comfortable knowing I can continue to have a job and I still have children. It helps, it's supposed to help women to be protected and also to protect their health, because they then don't have to worry. It protects the well-being of the mother. It also protects the well-being of the children. And in particular, we are looking at breastfeeding. And these are some of the facilities that are recommended to be present in a workplace for it to be a friendly environment for a woman who's breastfeeding. There's need to have a written policy, and for mothers to be able to breastfeed when they are back at their workplace. The atmosphere should be conducive that a woman can continue to breastfeed normally without worrying. But also staff, the other staff in the organization should be trained so that they can support breastfeeding mothers in these organizations. In Uganda, research has shown that 40% of children who are under 6 months do not get exclusively breastfed. And of course, this has health implications for them. And only 52% are breastfed within the first hour of birth. And in order to meet some of the demands of the ILO and other international organizations, the country adopted a policy on infant and young children feeding in 2007, which has an emphasis on breastfeeding. This policy has been going on now more than 10 years, but if you look around, most organizations, most institutions have not implemented most of the components of this policy. And the government has also not put in place mechanisms to enforce the policy. Most of the organizations in Uganda offer limited support to women who are breastfeeding, and mostly the mandatory one of maternity leave and nothing else apart from that. Now, this research, the aim of it, or the main goal, was to look at the lived experiences of mothers that were breastfeeding in a formal working environment, especially in one organization, in a higher education institution, and to look at their perceptions on the effects of maternity protection and its absence on their infants. Does it have any implication? And the specific objectives were to identify the policies that had been put in place by this specific institution to facilitate breastfeeding, to establish the perceptions of working mothers about their productive and those that are reproductive roles, and also to see what do they perceive as the effects of the lack or absence or presence of maternity protection on their children's welfare. We did a case study approach, and so we only went to one higher education institution, a private one. So this study is not representative of others. When we looked at literature, most of the literature that is out there is basically about health, looking at the health aspect of breastfeeding, but most of it was also quantitative. And so we thought our contribution would be to look at in-depth at one specific organization and then look at the lived experiences of these women. And so we did one study, one organization. Although our aim was that if we got more funding, we would like to look at what is happening in other organizations. And so maybe if we would like to scale this up. We used a qualitative approach, and this organization has offices in Central, Western, and Eastern Uganda. And so we looked at the different areas, and we interviewed. Our population was all the mothers that were breastfeeding, who had breastfed in the preceding 1 year. We also interviewed policymakers and some medical people in this organization. And we sampled 22 breastfeeding mothers, and we used purposive and snowball sampling. And so when we arrived at data saturation, we stopped, and we used in-depth interviews and focus group discussions. What were our results? What we found out was that this particular institution had no policy on maternity protection. There was no written policy, but they do provide mandatory maternity leave that is a law in the country, in Uganda, but there was no policy. And one of the managers, one of the top managers had this to say about policies. He said it has cost implications. Who is going to fund that? And the answer is no, because it will affect productivity, and it is important as far as work is concerned. It is not important as far as work is concerned. And so, because one of the questions was, would you be willing to give more than 3 months leave for the women so that they can go and breastfeed their children exclusively? When we talk to the mothers, these are the experiences that we saw. Most mothers were not able to breastfeed exclusively because of work-related demands. And those who did were those who got the 3 months leave that is mandatory and that is legally provided for. But this only applies to full-time staff, because part-time staff and temporary staff do not have this benefit of maternity leave. And so you find that only a few, especially in this higher education institution, where a lot of the people were part-time people and temporary people, the women didn't have that luxury. And this is one, in regards to health, the mothers felt that their health was compromised and the health of their children was also compromised. And one experience was this woman who had a C-section, and 1 week after giving birth, she had to come back because lectures were beginning. She had to come back with her baby, and somebody would take care of the baby. And so this woman, another woman, says to me, if I look at the stress that I've gone through, I have fears of getting pregnant again. When you see what others have gone through, you say, I should end here. So mothers were feeling like it's not possible to balance both work and having children. And so some of them are beginning to think, I better not become pregnant if I want to keep my job. And then I see my time is running out, so this one I will just skip over, but it's talking about the failure to balance. They felt it was very tough. It makes you walk around with a guilty conscience. Each time the baby falls sick, you're like, maybe if I was not working, the story would be different. So it has been that emotional pain of saying, I wish I had better alternatives. The environment, the women felt that the work environment was child unfriendly because they felt that they could not bring their children to the work. And they used to hear from their colleagues that when you're coming to work, they don't want you to come with your child because the kid makes noise for students who are studying. And so the environment was not friendly for breastfeeding mothers. And so some of them have had to devise personal strategies. Some use the breaks. They have time, like during lunchtime, they run home. Somebody would say it is hiding really. I would just say that, let me go for a short call, then I disappear. Either you get a help from your friend who can sacrifice to stand in for you to go and breastfeed. So many of them used to run away during time when they're supposed to be at work. the experiences that they have seen and the effects on their babies is that they have seen remarkable difference between children that have been exclusively breastfed and one that have not been, and those ones that have not been. One woman had this to say, I gave birth to the first when I was not working here. I breastfed that one 6 months without giving any other food. I've seen the difference between her and the sister. She wasn't getting that sickly. She was healthy, and even she walked before making a year. But for this one, I'm seeing she's weak. She's going to make a year, but she's not standing yet. So they could see that some of them experienced their children being unhealthy, and then they were unable to receive the sort of bonding that one gets as you breastfeed your child. This woman had this to say, even the issue of bonding, they miss that love, because in the morning before I came, we could play, make him smile, but now you just jump out of bed, you just put on the breast panicking, you throw him there because you have to leave. And so that bonding and love is not there. And another woman who dared to bring her baby to work was rudely shouted at because the baby was crying in the library. Some of the children have not been able to grow as fast as they could when they compare their other children whom they had before. This one had 4 children, and the 4th child was when she was working in this organization where she couldn't stay, and that had become very slow in their growth. Their children were suffering in terms of health because they were not able to exclusively breastfeed. This woman had to say, currently my baby is suffering from flu. I've not taken him to hospital, but when I breastfeed, the flu goes. So I feel exclusive breastfeeding is medicinal in those first 6 months. You can't see the baby falling sick now and again. So in a summary, really, this institution didn't have any support, any maternity protection, and women had to devise their own personal means to provide exclusive breastfeeding, some successfully, those who live nearby, but of course not everybody lives near where they work, and so some were not so successful. So women who are being encouraged to be in the public sphere, to work in formal organizations, to have the same opportunities as men, are grappling with being able to balance their productive and reproductive roles, especially when it comes to breastfeeding. They face challenges, and their children are being affected, their well-being is being affected. And we have these recommendations as a result of the study. These came from the participants. Almost all of them expressed the need to have breastfeeding facilities with a conducive environment. And they were all willing to share the cost for the provision of breastfeeding facilities. Our recommendation is based on this, what ILO says, that expectant and nursing mothers require special protection to prevent harm to them, to their and their infants' health. And they need adequate time to give birth, to recover, and to nurse their children. And so we recommend that at institutional level, there should be policies that protect and promote breastfeeding for breastfeeding mothers, but they should also establish facilities that enhance the ability of mothers to breastfeed without compromising their work at the workplace and the health of their children. At national level, we believe that the infant and young children feeding policy needs to be encouraged and guidelines put in place to make sure that it is implemented. And it is necessary to enforce this policy and not just have it. Recently in this month, Parliament passed the Employment Amendment Bill of 2022. There had been proposals to increase maternity leave from 60 to 90 days. This was rejected. There were proposals that institutions should have breastfeeding facilities. I haven't been able to find out whether this was passed, but there were arguments against it because people are saying that if you put it in place, then many organizations will stop hiring women of childbearing age. And so it's really important that at national level, we think through these issues of saying that we want women and men to have equal opportunities without providing the facilities that are needed to do that. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bachoyo, for yet another excellent presentation from UCU. Your presentation is now open for discussion. I will do as we did with the last one. Please put your hand up and I will give you permission to unmute and make your submission. Alternatively, you can go online in the chat under question and answer and you type your question there. So we have run a bit beyond time, but we shall still try to take questions in the next 5 minutes. There's one hand which is up. Let me see who it is. The hand is Alphonse. Alphonse again, please go ahead, unmute and make your submission. Alphonse, are you there? Can you give him permission to unmute? Host.
Okay. Alphonse, could you kindly allow to talk? We've unmuted you.
You have unmuted him. Okay, go ahead, Alphonse. Host, it seems Alphonse is not unmuted. Alphonse, go online into the Q&A and type your question there. Can we have another hand, please? Another hand. Yes, Emily, please go ahead. Unmute and make your submission.
Thank you, Professor Wabwire, for moderating this, and Professor Elizabeth for the presentation. And I'm just picking up on one thing. You did a case study and came up with all these rich stories, but have you considered as a follow-up to do a survey in various institutions, even beyond higher institutions of learning, to just see to what extent this is a problem in various places, so that it can have a more forceful impact in terms of just advocating for some of the recommendations you're making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another hand, please. If there are no hands, let me go into the Q&A segment. Oh, these are long. Okay. Professor Liz, kindly elaborate the rationale for snowballing. Otherwise, much appreciated. That is from Kizito Omona. David Okimait, thank you, Professor Liz, for this very insightful study that touches so much on early childhood development and maternity. Did some mothers suggest breast pumps as a way of securing enough breast milk in circumstances where they have to balance motherhood and work? And then Evans Were, thank you so much, Professor Bachoyo, for this wonderful study. Can home office for selected days in a week to nursing mothers, at least the first months, help the nursing mothers? So, Prof. Elizabeth, those are the questions. Some are for noting. You don't have to answer everything, but at least you can respond or react to some of those questions which have been asked.
Thank you very much, Professor Wire. I think the issue of snowballing, one of the things that we found out that 15 minutes are too short to say much, is that some women actually didn't want the management to know that they were pregnant because they thought that it might endanger their jobs. And so for some, they would give birth, but they were not reporting. And so that's why we were using snowballing, because we the ones, usually the women who are breastfeeding will share, and so you get to know the other people who are breastfeeding, because we also went to the HR to get the information, but we also felt like there were others, and indeed we found there were others who didn't report to the HR. And the issue of survey, that is still our desire, because we thought we would just start with this as a case study, but we know that these results can't be generalized, and we would like to know what is happening in other formal organizations in Uganda and even around this region. And so, yes, if we were able to get funding, that would be our next stop, that we would like to scale up this research. Breast pumps, only one person brought up this breast pump, but the others actually didn't seem, they didn't like or were not excited about that whole idea of using that. I think most were preferring to use their breasts, to have their children with them, to have them here, because it also includes the bonding aspect. Home office to nursing mothers, it would probably work, but the organizations would have to warm up to it. As you saw, some of the management felt like that's an extra expense. And as we have seen with the debate on having breastfeeding facilities, most employers would rather not employ women if it's going to increase on the cost of hiring them. Thank you for those questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Bachuayo, for responding to those questions. And thank you to the audience for posing very insightful questions as well. We have now come to the end of this first episode of webinars. I want to thank AfriChild for hosting these webinars and organizing them. From today's attendance, I see that there is a need, there was a yearning for this knowledge. So we look forward to the next webinars. Please stay tuned. AfriChild will send you communication on when the second webinar is going to be held. We hope they can be held until we finish all the research that was done, and then even go back for a second round. I think the quality of the work is good, the quality of the presentations are good. This gives us a learning opportunity in the area of child-focused research. So I'm very glad that I've been able to moderate this session. I apologize that you have not seen my face, but hopefully next time when they ask me, you'll be able to see my face. I want to wish you a wonderful evening for those of you in this part of the world. Those of you who have just woken up, we wish you a good day and have a productive rest of the week. Thank you very much. And please go ahead. Or they say that I can go ahead and start my video. Okay, let's see how we do it. We have done that. I have to get this out of the way. How come you can't see me? I've opened my video. Okay. Anyhow, probably next time, host.
We see you, Prof.
See you, Prof.
Oh, you can see me, but I can't see myself.
I can see you.
Okay, that's right. Then it's good. Usually when I do that, I'm able to see myself as well. Okay, have a good evening, and we'll see you next time. Hopefully within about a week.
Okay, Prof.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.